Hey everyone, my name's Darsh. This talk is the art of threat detection, and yeah, thanks everyone for coming down, especially on a Sunday. Really good to see. Before I kind of get going, I just want to thank UTS CSEC, the uni, the sponsors. It's just amazing to see everyone like coming together and having this amazing venue, and everything's organized and everything's lovely. I remember when we first kind of like were at uni doing UTS CSEC stuff, just getting a room with like 20 people to come in would be just, yeah, wow, we got that going. But yeah, so this is really great to see. I'll get started. So I was going to put obligatory, who am I? But Alexi stole that yesterday, so I had to change that to compulsory. I'm Darsh. I do blue team things at Willow at the moment. My experience has mainly been blue team as well in the past with enterprise. When I'm not doing like security stuff, I attend too many live gigs recently, so I write about it. So if you guys want to have a look, there's a blog there. And I'm really into like Aussie birds as well, bit of a birder. So seeing Galar Cyber out there with the Galar logo was just amazing as well, so shout out to them. But yeah, like, you're all here, and this is about threat detection. It might be that this is maybe the first time you've heard of it, or you don't really know what it's, what does it mean? So basically what this talk is gonna kind of give you a glimpse on is why we need threat detection, what it is in a defensive security context, and we're going to go through like the challenges and what's actually involved in making our organization secure and defending them. So you can see here just like really basic stuff like what's the threat, like that's the bad stuff. Detection is like just like catching it, right? And then there's bits in this talk that are about like detection engineering. All that is just like, how do we like catch the bad stuff better, right? But yeah, and also want to acknowledge that like with threat detection, not all teams have like a specific specialized kind of unit that just does threat detection. Often it'll just be like the defensive security teams, the blue teams, the SOC, the Security Operations Center. They'll be kind of doing a lot of these alerting and monitoring, but over time, like that will build up, and hopefully this talk will kind of show that. What does it kind of feel like to do threat detection? This is the way I kind of picture it sometimes. It's that it's solving puzzles, right? Like we all kind of have done like CTFs, or we may have seen it, like the DU CTF is going on as well, which is amazing, but CTFs or just like coding or like just doing any type of assignment, you have like puzzles and you're trying to solve them. That's what draws a lot of us into cybersecurity. And this is kind of similar because you have to try and figure out not only like trying to catch the bad thing, but in order to catch it effectively, you need to be able to replicate that bad thing, the malicious thing that's happening. We need to know how that attack works. We need to know the ins and outs of like what's going to be generated when that attack happens. What are the artifacts that are going to be there? We need to then work out the logic behind, okay, so we have something bad that we want to try and catch, but like, how do we make sure we're only catching the bad things? So that's where like the logic comes in. So in terms of like the puzzle piece, it's there, the puzzle's there. You know what the bad thing looks like potentially, or what you're trying to get at, but it's just a matter of like, okay, piecing it all together. So then, like, that's threat detection or detection stuff. So that's like the the what and all that. But then like, why? Wow. You may be asking like, what's the point of spending this? This sounds like really full on. There's a whole thing happening. Why spend this much time or this much effort into all this? You may say also like, hey, we should just spend all this resources on like preventing stuff and like actually having controls to make sure, when people are doing bad things, trying to break into our systems or whatever, they shouldn't be able to even do that. But unfortunately, it's never perfect. You can never, guarantee 100% that you're not going to get breached or you're not going to get intruded upon. So it's not perfect. There's always going to be gaps. We're also humans at the end of the day. We may have policies and things where you're supposed to, they're not supposed to be able to do that, but eventually it turns out, no, someone forgot to apply this config somewhere or something like that. So we're humans, we make mistakes, things can happen where people can come in and we can get exposed. Also, adversaries evolve, so like you can have all the perfect preventative measures and everything, but adversaries are one step ahead, so you need to be able to detect if they get through everything. And like the concept I want to leave you all with is that it's the last line of defense. Having like really cool, good detection rules and thinking far ahead means that even if you've done everything, something happens, and at the end they get through. If you have something that will alert on that badness happening, then you can know there's something bad's happening rather than them telling you towards the end or not telling you at all. So like this is how it kind of looks like, right? So like, the example here is like last line of defense. You do all this amazing training, everyone is trained up. Maybe it's on like phishing stuff. You have like policies where they can't open certain things or things are like blocked. You invest in like the best endpoint security that guarantees everything will be blocked forever. All the marketing stuff as well. But at the end of the day, like as I explained in the previous slide, like things can happen. Like training, someone forgets, someone's new. Maybe it's a new strategy that we didn't train up on. Policies, someone forgot to turn that thing off. Endpoint security, it's not like something that will just always block everything. It's not that difficult to bypass that. So then at the end, if we have something that says, hey, someone's running like, who am I? Like it sounds really simple, like who am I is what sometimes we all use to try and figure out, or like ID, we might try and figure out like, wait, are we root or not, or so just being able to like run that, and even if it's like a really simple thing, imagine if we had some sort of like an analytic on that or like some detection on that. So like, hey, someone's running, who am I? All of a sudden, we should look into that. So then we have that one lead that we can go on rather than just it being missed entirely. So let me paint the picture as to, the challenges and how actually threat detection gets set up initially. As I said, not everyone has like not every team or company has the luxury of like having a dedicated team just looking at threats. But ultimately, you have your systems. They're going to be set up according to business needs. You're going to have your networks. They need to be they need to be able to talk to each other. You're going to then have your policies, and then when all of those things are kind of there, you want to be able to monitor all of these things, and then as a result, being able to create alerts out of them. And this could just be like initially the purpose of this could just be uptime and things like that, But that gives us that's also gives security teams the ability to detect and respond. So like painting the picture, so like this is what it would typically kind of look like in a very basic zoomed out view. You have a bunch of these sources, these are all the things that you have in your environment, right? It could be anything. It could be, it could be anything. This is just like an illustration, but you have this stuff there. All of these things should be creating some sort of, logging or some sort of, some sort of debugging where you can see what's happening in them. And you basically want to ingest whatever they create. And that's what ends up with all of these logs that we get. And I'll show you some examples soon. So you get these logs. And then as they're ingested, what we kind of want to do with like detection, as we'll kind of go through in this presentation, is that we want to then apply rules to these logs because these logs have like data, and we want to use that to figure out if something bad is happening or not. And once we have those rules, they're processing those logs. At the end, you should get some sort of an alert or alerts, and that then notifies us that something's happening. Now, as I said, the monitoring and alerting part is really crucial here, and this is like just a really simple example. Again, this could be something that maybe the systems administrator sets up, the one-person security team sets up, or anything like that. But this is like the basics of like getting into like threat detection and stuff. So, you have your policies, your systems, and everything like that. That kind of dictates the types of ruling that you'll create. So like in here, the example is like, we have just a traditional IT system. We are SSHing into them remotely. I know not the best, but we have to do it. That's just the policy that we have. But one of the policies that we have is we should never have root logging in, for example. So in that kind of checklist that I showed you, you would have these things being monitored, and as like security people, like defending stuff, detection engineers, anything like that, you want to be able to like think about that and say, hey, okay, we have these policies. We shouldn't be doing root. The way we've done it is like we have images that already have SSH disabled, for example, and they should never be able to go in and do that. So this is a really good like analytic, or like this is a really good signal that if somehow someone logs in as root, regardless if it's from anywhere, that should ring alarm bells, because it should be disabled. It should not be in our policies, things like that. So yeah, there's just like pseudo logic there, but like just an example of how that alerting system would work, for example, right? So if they're logged in and they're root, then that's stuff could be on fire. And then obviously, as these alerts are created, going back to Ian's excellent talk yesterday about like incident response and things like that, you would then have that process of triaging these things, actually figuring out, is it a true positive, false positive, and then responding to that as needed. Yeah, this is just a part of like the regular monitoring and alerting. Now, like moving on to like just more detection patterns. So, that was just like one example, but one of the things that I wanted to kind of point out is these are the examples of like indicator and signature-based detections. Again, not exhaustive, but just some ideas. And this is what you may typically kind of have, like, MD5 hash, which kind of tells us like a signature of a file. Maybe this is like a really malicious file. I think this is like Mimikatz or something. If you see that, that should be bad. Like this is just really basic atomic ideas that we're going through. If the remote address is this and the domain is that, which we know are potentially bad, which we shouldn't be seeing, we should set up alerts for that using something like this. The next one is, I think, based on like Felina, which was a Office 0 day that happened a few months ago. I've lost track of time, but that one was like, hey, if Word is creating any processes like MSDT, that's something that we should probably look into. And then URLs, this pattern there, if someone's going into this, could be bad. This is based on the F5 vulnerability, I think. So yeah, basically like indicators and signature-based stuff is just like matching based on a bunch of stuff that we want to kind of detect. And this is why I want to bring you to the pyramid of pain. This was devised by David Bianco. I think they're a SANS instructor and they do some amazing things, but one of the things they've kind of stipulated and shared with, and it's part of like many detection engineers kind of remit, is like, okay, it's one thing to just detect on like indicators, signatures, things like that. But what we should be looking at is, yeah, you can do that all the time and you can have all those alerts set up, but at the end of the day, that's not what the adversaries will be able to have difficulty with if we think about it. So this pyramid is showing how hard is it as it goes up for the adversaries to basically redo the attack, right? So if we have some detections for like the hashes or IPs, yeah, we catch them maybe because they're using the same thing, but like it's based on this, and as an example, for a hash, you just change some file attributes, just change something of the file, the hash will change. IP address, pretty easy to just, depending on what they're using, just pretty easy to just grab a brand new one from like, AWS or DigitalOcean or wherever. Domain names, again, pretty simple to change. And then it gets harder and harder as it go up. So you can have these detections, and yeah, we'll maybe catch them once, but then they can just change it and try again, and we'll lose that precious time. And as a result, they'll be able to do maybe a lot more, right? And that's what we don't want. So what we want to do is, as people here like who may be interested in threat detection, is actually looking for the things that are really hard for them to change. So network and host artifacts, like, yeah, maybe they're using they're using certain scripts or something, and it's always going to do it's always going to happen at a certain location, or maybe it goes to a certain like URL or domain. They'll have to change the script and things like that. Again, not super hard, but a bit more annoying. Maybe they're using specific tools. We create detections for the tooling instead. We catch the tool being run, not just some really atomic things. And as a result, yeah, it's harder for them to actually change because they'll have to change the tooling, for example. And then the holy grail is TTP, which is tactics, techniques, and procedures. And that one is tough because it's tough for both the adversaries and for the defenders, because that encompasses everything that they do, and not just in the sense like they just run this tool and they run it like this, but it's a matter of actually strategizing as to how they're going to come in, how they're actually going to, like what do they normally go after, what kind of technologies will they be using, and basically painting a bigger picture on it. I'll give some examples shortly, but that's the holy grail. So if we try and catch on TTPs, then what happens is, instead of just looking at really basic levels of like indicators, we're going to be catching them in one stage or another, because we've thought about the whole process of how they perform attacks, how adversaries perform attacks. So something that is being used quite often, which you may or may not have already kind of been exposed to, but if you haven't, I highly encourage you to visit, is MITRE ATT&CK. This is kind of a framework that outlines these tactics, techniques, and procedures, and it's open source, anyone can contribute. People put some stuff in from first-hand experience, and here you kind of see, like on the left, you can see the tactics, you see the techniques, you see the kind of details of what those techniques like involve, and then within each technique, you also get an idea of like the detection that's available with the data that you have, and it gives you some pointers and ideas as to how to do that. So if you think about it, like you can, if we try and cover all of these tactics and techniques based on an adversary, we can get a more holistic way of catching them when they're trying to do bad things, rather than just focusing on one very small thing, for example, or a few small things. Now moving, so then this is where it kind of evolves, and one of the things we can also look at after realizing that just doing atomic stuff, just doing like IOC, indicator-based things, the signature-based things, as I told you, it's really easy to change that potentially. What if we then go into the next level? And the next level is something like anomaly-based. So, generally it just means, you baseline what the normal thing is. So you maybe collect data for like a week or something, try and figure out, okay, we get this amount of logins in this amount of time. And again, we go through, the policies that we have, the knowledge of IT in our systems that we have, and we kind of use like stats to try and figure out, okay, this is probably anomalous, right? So an example is like, we've done a 7-day thing and we find out, okay, no one's obviously logging in from anywhere outside Australia using the logs that we have, and that's our policy as well. We don't have any overseas kind of contractors or whatever. So it would be pretty weird if we suddenly saw, someone logging in from a country other than Australia. So just that kind of pseudo logic that we had, we could probably put something up. But the coolest and the most fun things is always the behavior-based detection pattern, which is more like, okay, it's one thing to have anomalies. So the thing with anomalies is that the IT environments can change. You have to sometimes put an arbitrary number to things. You may not always know what's actually like normal. So you end up having some noise and you have to end up tuning it. So with like behavior, what's fun is, this is where you actually try and have to like, this is the creative aspect of threat detection in my opinion, is that you have to try and figure out, okay, what kind of sequences, what kind of patterns can we see that we can use to actually have a more confident detection that, hey, if they're going to do all these types of things, we're pretty sure they're doing bad things, right? So like, for example, like you have that uncommon IP, you use that as one starting point, you then kind of see that, okay, they've failed to log in 3 times after, but then they log in successfully a bit later, maybe they're just like trying some things out. And then also the users logged in at like 3 AM at their local time. Now, as you can see, that tells a kind of like a better story. Like the fact that all of this comes together lets us know that this is probably something we need to look into. The good news is, like, all of these rules and things like that, if anyone's interested to look into them, see how other people create them, write them, a lot of companies have made their rules open source. They have their own kind of languages and the way they set up their logic sometimes, but it's generally pretty good to follow. But yeah, all of these repositories on GitHub, you can just search them on GitHub and they'll come up, but I'll share some links later. But they've actually shared them out. So if you want to know those entire like TTPs and you want to see how other companies cover them, that's something that you can look into. I highly encourage it. We'll see if we can get through some later. But then we get to like, so that was like the whole threat detection part, just a quick intro. And then we get into like this detection engineering aspect of it. I think I said like, okay, detection engineering is like how you catch the bad stuff, but in a better way. And these are the kind of, some of the tenets that it's based on as to what we're trying to optimize for. So I'll go through them each way and I'll provide some context. So one of the terms you'll kind of see commonly referred to is like telemetry. So that's ultimately the data. So to write detections, you need data. You need as much data as you can get, but sometimes you have to make do with what you have. And what I mean by data is like, hey, those logs, they're going to have certain things that you want in them. You know, they have their IP addresses, or they have the time, or they have all sorts of features in that you want. So the more data that you can collect, the more you can do with that. So that's the data, and that's called telemetry. And there's various types of telemetry as well, you know, just based on the type of technology that we're collecting it from, like servers or applications or anything like that. Then you need to get that data to a place where it's going to need to be processed, right? So we can write the rules, we can have the data, but then if we don't ship it and have it processed, like, it's not going to work. So a pipeline is another important thing, and basically what it means is like having that, having all that data there and shipping it reliably to a place that we want it to. And you know, that's involves things like Kafka and some of those like data warehousing and data processing technologies. So that's the pipeline. And then you have the rules, which we kind of just discussed a little bit before. And it's also commonly referred to as like analytics. And you can kind of see like the comparison maybe, where it's like data analytics, you know, threat detection. There are some parallels because ultimately you're working with data, you're trying to find patterns, and you're trying to then, get that as a signal that something's bad. And then towards the end, what you have is automation and alerting. So why aren't they separate, or why is automation first? Like, ultimately, I think what we're getting up to now is that if you can think about it this way, data in a small company, maybe it's fine, we can handle, you know, tens of alerts a day or something, we can do that, right? But what if you kind of scale up, go to bigger companies that have data maybe in terabytes a day, petabytes a day, right? You can, if you write like a simple rule like, hey, alert on any time like a connection is happening from an external IP or something, you're going to get maybe hundreds or maybe thousands of alerts, and people who are triaging them will get fatigued, right? So now, part of detection engineering, we also have to think about how these alerts are triaged. And that's where the automation comes in. Like maybe we can just do like a simple thing before it even turns into an alert, so that we can rule it out if it's automatically a false positive or something that's normal, or this user is in a list that's saying they're traveling to US for like 2 weeks or something. So it will then take care of that, for example. And then you want the alerting aspect, because if no one's getting alerted, then what's the point of detection? Because that's what ultimately sets off the triaging and incident process if it is something that's found to be bad. But yeah, that's that. And then the next thing I want to introduce you to today is, it's called the funnel of fidelity. This is from SpectreOps. Again, amazing. I have some resources toward the end, but this is kind of contextualizing all of that into detection engineering, the challenge of it all. So as you can see, we're collecting all of this, and we get millions, billions of events, maybe more. You then want to, you basically want to funnel it down. So towards the end, what you're actually getting is a surefire, incident, something's actually bad. It's not just something that, oh, we forgot to do this logic where, we didn't account for this particular policy or this particular feature of our company. So that's where the funnel is happening. So as you can see, detection, you may get a lot of them. Traditionally, they get triaged by maybe humans in a security operations center, for example, and they kind of funnel that down. Maybe 50% of them are false positives, like they're just not correct, or the logic is bad, or it's all legitimate. But then there's more that's going to require investigations, that's going to take time. Maybe some will just need to be fixed rather than it being like a security thing. Maybe there's some admin somewhere that's just wants to run, Bloodhound to like check everything, and if they want to do that, they can. But then we need to actually figure out, okay, why are they doing that? Go into details about that. But then at the end, like all it takes is, the reason we do all this is, it's better to catch something rather than nothing. And that's the challenge of detection engineering, because we have to be able to take all of the kind of things that we've kind of talked about, but optimize for it, make it efficient, and reduce the false positive rate. Because, yeah, we can try and just alert on everything, but then, as I said, fatigue, maybe we miss things because we haven't alerted upon everything. But yeah, SpectreOps did it really well here. Don't clog the funnel. So in terms of hands-on, if it's something that's like really interests you, what I'd recommend is setting up something like Security Onion, which is a virtual machine, but it's also an image you can deploy on the cloud as well. It's free. You can just grab it, connect it to your network if you want, to a lab network, anything like that. And it has all of these things built in. So it actually has set up the alerting system, has set up the logging pipelines, has set up everything. And you can customize them if you want. If you want to play around with the fact that, hey, I want to be able to solve some puzzles like this, or try and alert on these types of things, Security Onion will allow you to do that. In fact, a lot of organizations actually use it as well as their detection and alerting and response kind of platform. Alternative is Detection Lab. That's more based on, it uses Splunk and things like that. So if anyone's familiar with that, I'd recommend that. Again, it just sets it up for you. It's just a VM, and you can deploy in the cloud as well. And another thing I'd encourage is you can actually write and contribute detection alerts and rules. So if you're interested in hey, I've learned some really cool things over this weekend, and maybe Active Directory was really interesting to you. If you want to get into the mindset of a defensive security practitioner, maybe think about okay, if I wanted to actually catch this happening, what could I do to alert upon that? So you could start at the very at the very bottom of that pyramid of pain, you can just say, I'm just going to alert on the hashes, for example, but then you can try and progress further and further. Like, no, it creates these files in this particular location, or I'm seeing this type of log in Windows events that I can alert upon, for example. But all of those repos that I shared earlier, Sigma, Elastic, Splunk, and all the others as well, they do have pull requests open, so you can go in and actually submit your own detection rules as well if you are interested in that. And yeah, I would highly recommend that. It's also really cool to do this when there's like 0 days happening or vulnerabilities that are being shown up or anything like that, because you'll find that a lot of people come together and start to create these pseudo logic, even if it's just pseudo logic. They're just thinking about, okay, if this happens and that happens, then that's how we know that if someone is actually trying to run that or do something bad there. And yeah, it's always good to contribute that way as well. Yeah, like a new tool gets released, run it, get all the logging set up on like Security Onion or Detection Detection Lab, and see what it generates and see if you can kind of figure out the puzzle for that. But yeah, look, that's pretty much all I had. I've compiled all the links there if anyone wants to kind of look at them. There's some additional reading material there as well. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff there if anyone's interested. It's also got some of the VMs that I was talking about and some other compilations there. But that's about it from me. Thank you very much.